What kind of impact did Terry Francona truly have on the 2004 Boston Red Sox? You're about to find out on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate, and also currently the host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it's all free, so you might as well tune in, right? Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Welcome to another episode of the show where I am here with 2004 Boston Red Sox pitcher and World Series champion Bronson Arroyo. So here's more of the conversation we had. There was another A-Rod incident that same season, again with you and him, when he was running down the baseline and he slapped the ball out of your glove. And to be honest, live, it kind of was a confusing situation. Like, it didn't really make sense what had actually happened. So from your perspective, can you just explain a little bit how that actually went down?
Yeah, in fast motion, it looked a little odd. You weren't really sure what happened. The ball got kicked down the right field line, and I wasn't even sure where the ball was or anything. I knew what had happened, but yeah, it looked a little different in fast motion. But as you see it in slow motion, what really happened, I threw him a really slow breaking ball because I was a guy who lived on a lot of curveballs, and I could throw it about 66 miles an hour all the way up to about 80 if I needed to. And Alex was a guy, like I said earlier, who really could hit a breaking ball in the zone, to left center field with a lot of authority. And so I was giving him something that I knew he wanted to hit, but about 10 miles an hour slower. And so he saw it, his eyes lit up, he swings and he hits it right off the end of the bat. And if you've been on the mound and had balls hit right off the end of the bat, it's going to be spinning like a top. It's just, going like this, and it can just shoot out of your glove. So the only thing in my mind was just make sure I don't let this ball just shoot out of my glove, because now I'm really going to be in trouble. I've got Gary Sheffield at the plate. There's going to be two guys on. So I just corralled it with both hands, but I just assumed Doug Minkiewicz would be on first base because I'm a pretty quick guy off the mound. And usually my infielders would know that I could handle, the grassy part in front of me and to the sides. But, in an occasion like that, there's so much adrenaline going. He probably just wanted to come in. And so when I grab the ball, I look up and Doug is standing right next to me. And I know that he can't get back to first base before Alex beats him there. And so I go into a little bit of a panic, and I'm looking to see where Alex is. And when I look up, he's kind of jogging, he's not running that hard. And so I immediately knew I had some time. So I just kind of relaxed. I just wanted to tag him nice and easy. It's just an out. And I don't know what went through his mind in those split seconds leading up to that. But it probably, me hitting him on July 24th and having that fight was probably in the back of his mind a bit, like a little bit of disdain for me. And so maybe he wouldn't have done that if anybody else was on the mound. But it was just out of his instinct. He thought, let me just chop this out of his arm and see what happens, And, it's one of the craziest plays that's ever happened to me. And, after that, the umpires are conferring. And after they called, him out and sent Derek back all the way to first base, they started raining stuff down in the stadium. There's batteries and beer bottles coming. And the rest of that game felt like we were playing in a war, to be honest, because there was so many police officers on both sides in the riot gear just lining the field. And, it was one of those occasions that really just heightened all of the tension between the two teams. And, it was a memorable moment, obviously. And it's something that I have to sign autographs for a lot. The picture of that has been around for a lot of years.
Yeah, it was just so funny because I don't think a lot of people really knew what had happened. And I was like, the reactions seemed to me like, on the field, they might have known more what went on. And I feel like you personally, with the expression on your face, seemed to know that something had happened there. And I was like, I wonder what that actually was and what actually went down there. But it's just funny because adds to that narrative of just that tension between the two teams in general for just the entirety of that whole season.
Yeah. And it was, for me, it was like when I went to tag him, he chopped my arm, my glove flew off, and I caught my glove on the other side of him. And Doug Minkiewicz was just looking at me and he was like, "You all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And that look on my face was because it was obviously being able to review plays. So I was just looking, and I always knew that there was 6 umpires in a playoff game versus 4 in a regular season game. So the only thing that was going through my mind was, one of these 6 guys had to see how ridiculous that was. Like this is not a normal baseball play. And I assumed they would get it right. Now, I know that Red Sox fans were probably on the edge of their seat because the ball had swung, the pendulum had swung in the negative side for them so many times in crucial situations over the years that they were, thought they had the bad luck juju on them. But I thought for sure that the play was going to get overturned.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about just how far they've come with being able to review plays now, because I can't even imagine or think about how many plays there have been where they've had to do these long reviews and then they've ended up changing the call. And it kind of is a lifesaver now for the sport because there's just so many plays that could have gone either way. And if they didn't have that replay option, the results could have been a lot different. So it's just interesting that things have changed so much now when they have that, because it really is useful for them to have it.
Yeah, I totally agree. If we rewind history and we give everybody instant replay, I guarantee you that there's probably like half of the World Series champions are going to be different,
Yeah, isn't that weird to think about? It's kind of crazy, yeah, because there's definitely plays that would have been called differently probably had they been able to look it over. But when it comes to that 2004 Boston Red Sox team, obviously lots of things had to go right for that team, but it also definitely stems from good leadership. And Terry Francona obviously was in his first season managing the Boston Red Sox at that time. What do you think it was about him that made him such a successful manager in his first year with the team that season? Because he obviously has gone on after that to have a lot of success as a manager too.
Yeah, what Tito brought to the table and continued to bring to the table, with Cleveland for many, many years was the fact that he kind of trusted his team in a lot of ways. He's a manager who kind of doesn't try to get in the way too much. He kind of would set the lineup, maybe have a couple of small meetings, but he wasn't a guy who was trying to shuffle too many cards. He understood that we had a really, really good ball club of, dynamic players. I mean, if you look at that roster of guys, how many guys from that team will probably end up in someone's Hall of Fame? Like I went into the Reds Hall of Fame last year, and I feel like I'm like the 15th, best player on that team at best. You know what I mean? Like you look at Derek Lowe won 175 games. Wakefield won 200. You got Pedro, you got Schilling, right? Manny, this is like an all-star team. I mean, Bill Miller won a batting title, right? I mean, like these guys can really play baseball, and Terry knew that. And in a lot of ways, he just kind of let us do our thing. And he also was kind of easygoing and really loved to mix it up with the players, right? Like if there was fantasy football going on, I remember one day I was up in the weight room and we were playing the Yankees at home. I never forget this. It was 2005 though. And Terry's running around frantic looking for Millar. And I thought he needed to like change something in the lineup or something. And I said, "What do you need him for?" And he said, "Oh, I'm about to make a trade in my fantasy football league." I was dying laughing, but Tito who could blend with the players like that. And when you can blend with the players like that, you don't feel like you're walking into a principal's office every time you talk to your manager. It really helps, communication. It really helps the dynamic of a locker room. And then, like I said, there was just so many big dogs in that locker room. I mean, honestly, anybody who would have come in and really tried to like clamp down on us, it wouldn't have worked. Guys like Millar were just two half nuts in that locker room. I mean, Pedro was running around the locker room. You had Derek Lowe, you had Curtis Laskanik. We had some guys who were just like half lunatics in that locker room. And, it was kind of a bit of a circus. And you needed you needed like somebody who was kind of wrangling the whole thing, but you didn't want somebody just really on a day-to-day, just kind of like, cracking heads. And Tito did a great job of that, just kind of like letting the thing play out as it should.
Yeah, I feel like that's so important too. And something that isn't always talked about enough is really the importance of the manager in a clubhouse, because I feel like that can really make or break the whole environment of the team and just the outlook of the season and how it's going. And when you have somebody who truly is a player's manager, who can relate to the players and connect with them, like you mentioned, and can kind of make it a more fun environment while also having the understanding that you're here to win baseball games, I feel like that creates a really healthy environment for the players to be a part of.
Right. And Terry had also come from Philadelphia, where it's very, very hard to play, and they didn't have success over there. And he had been under the microscope and been kind of like booed out of the place, right? So it was nothing that was going to flap him too much. He was coming to a big environment on a big stage, but he had already been to a place that was pretty harsh. And so, for him, he kind of fell right into it. And like I said, he was more of a jokester. A lot of times, Terry's very self-deprecating, and he was, he thought of himself in a lot of ways as a player, the way he was preparing and making sure that he had his cup of coffee and that he was, good to go. And he's got his bubble gum mixed with his tobacco that he used to chew all the time. Right. He wasn't like a stiff. He wasn't like a corporate guy. He's like a ball player just inside that locker room, just happened to be retired. And so, it really helps to have that kind of vibe when you have a good ball club.
Bronson Arroyo was definitely very insightful in my conversation with him, and you'll be hearing a lot more of that next, but I absolutely have to tell you about Tax Network. Here on Locked On Red Sox, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for this team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. I, here at Locked On, am an independent contractor, and sometimes it can be very confusing to file taxes in that situation. So I've utilized Tax Network USA to be able to get it right, and they've been so helpful. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit taxnetworkusa.com/lockedon. That is tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode description below. I'm telling you, this can be a great resource for you, especially with how stressful of a time tax season can be. So check that out today. Also, check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app, as we as a network have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, and it's available for you no matter what time zone you're in. It is 24 hours a day, and we will keep you up to date on all of the latest and the biggest sports stories, so you won't have to worry about scrolling through social media to catch up. So absolutely subscribe to that today as well. It's just so many things that you can look back on and think about that led to everything that happened in 2004 and just the group of people that were a part of it. It was just a really special group of people. And for you, obviously having to pitch in high leverage situations during that run, how did you handle the pressure that came with that?
Luckily, by the time I'd gotten over to the Red Sox, I'd already had 7 years in the minor leagues, basically, with the Pirates. I hadn't played on that big of a stage, and I hadn't played in the playoffs. But just having enough games under your belt, even at the minor league level, I threw 1,100 minor league innings. I have 84 wins down there. I was down there for a long time, and I never missed starts, right? And I was putting up really quality numbers year after year after year. And so you're kind of like year after year, kind of like building this armor. or peeling back these layers of how it is to perform it on a different stage. And so you're first trying to perform, just at the professional level. And then you're figuring out, like, how do I win at the professional level consistently? And then it's like, how do I also do this when there's 40,000 there and you're in Yankee Stadium and the place is going crazy and your adrenaline's trying to surge, right? And so I had just enough experience throughout my tenure with the Pirates that by the time I got to Boston, I already felt like a pretty seasoned pitcher. And the organization kind of, they saw success out of the gate with me, so they kind of left me alone. There wasn't a lot of people treating me like I was a young guy. They treated me like I was a 27 or 28-year-old guy who was, relatively young at the big league level, but they weren't treating me like a rookie. And that helped a lot because they left me freed up to pitch backwards the way I did, with a lot of breaking balls and beating guys with different arm angles and stuff. And so that helped a lot going into it. And then, just making that playoff roster in 2003 and only getting in the game a couple of times out of the bullpen in the Yankee series, but that really helped me kind of understand what it was like also to pitch in October in cool weather in a windy Yankee Stadium in front of a crowd like that. And, so by the time 2004 came and I got the ball every fifth day as a starter, once Young Kim was kind of moved out of that role, I felt as comfortable there as I had ever pitched in the minor leagues. And once you kind of like shed that uncomfortableness of there's too many eyes on me and are they second guessing what I do out here, once you can shed that, you can really just be yourself and kind of let the talent flow. And that's kind of what happened with me by the time I was in a Red Sox uniform.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a matter of having that veteran experience. And I feel like that's something that is huge when it comes to making those deep postseason runs. And something about the current Red Sox team is that they definitely don't have a ton of veteran experience on the team right now. And they've definitely had some struggles for sure this season. And it's a long season. Every team goes through stretches where they're just not going to be playing their best baseball. And it's hard to maintain this super competitive level of baseball all season long. So what advice would you give to the current Red Sox team when they are facing struggles or they are, feeling like they're in a rough patch in their season?
I think teams these days, they do a better job than, the bar is always being raised, right? And the evolution of everything, if you just look at track and field, we're not going to go backwards, right? And so they are doing a better job at scouting, taking care of their bodies, health and nutrition. Across the board, Major League Baseball is really on top of it. These guys have therapists in there. They're doing it day to day. But like you said, it's a game of failure. If you're an amazing hitter, you still lose 70% of the time, right? And if you're a starting pitcher, if you can go out there and win half your games, that's a great season. And so it's tough at times. For me, I think probably the most it would be that the simplest thing that I could give to people was the same thing I would say to a 10-year-old kid. And it is, don't beat yourself up for not having success during games, but do beat yourself up for lack of preparation. So if you go in and you've done everything you can to prepare yourself for big league ball games and you go out there and get your butt kicked 4 and 5 times in a row, it's just the way it is. Don't second guess yourself. Know that your preparation is solid and you're going to keep getting at it. And hopefully the tide is going to turn. Guys who have failures on the field and are constantly sitting in their locker for hours after the game with this giant weight on their shoulders. I find those guys are just beating themselves up to the point it's too long of a season to be able to do that. And you've got to be able to wipe it off quickly, take a beating, come back the next day and just have a fresh face and a fresh mind and prepare yourself again, knowing that you're doing all the right things.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is dwell on a bad performance just because there's just too many games, like you said, to where you don't want it to impact your future performances. And that's why I feel like for starting pitchers, especially when they only go every 5 days, if they have a bad outing, it's tough because they have to wait a while for their next one to try to make up for that.
Absolutely. That was the toughest thing about being a starting pitcher. There was no doubt, especially coming from a guy like me who played every day in high school. You get to the rookie league, I was going out of my mind that I could only play once every fifth day when I first got to the rookie league. And then eventually you kind of settle into that routine. And as long as you're doing well, hey, 4 days off is amazing after I threw 8-inning shutout, in Milwaukee. But you get your butt kicked for 2 2/3 and give up 7 runs and then turn that around with another bad one back to back. And now it's been 10 days since you've had success and you're out there shagging fly balls in the outfield and they're throwing them to you and you're putting them in the bucket and then walking them into the pitching coach who's throwing batting practice. And the only thing you can think about is I can't wait to get back out on the mound again to just turn this around, because it's eating at you, and it's really hard to push that negativity out. But the point is, we say it in every other facet of life, right? It's like if you get in a car accident, there's no point in dwelling on it. The only thing you could do is say, hey, call my insurance company, take care of it. Let's do the best we can to take care of the problem. And in sports, it's very hard to let it go sometimes. But I feel like the easier you can let things go, the quicker you could turn the corner. And so for a guy like myself to maybe give up 2 or 3 runs early in a ball game and still grind 6 or 7 innings for your team and come back and get that win, that type of mentality allowed me to do that for a long period of time. And some guys, never kind of get that. And after they leave the game, they wish they could have. But sometimes we don't realize that the best players in every sport in the world are in their mid-20s. And these guys don't have that much life experience. And so sometimes it's hard to put that negativity aside and kind of clear yourself from the anxiety and what you think everybody's talking about you on the radio and in the newspaper.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And now on social media too, because with that being a big thing now, everybody's talking about players on social media when they aren't performing well. And that's something that I think guys need to try to just not pay attention to and try to block out, because that could be worse for their performance later on if they're letting that get in their head. And that's why ultimately these guys are, among the best at what they do, because they are able to still perform even if they didn't have their best performance the last time.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, it's kind of, it happens all the time, but it definitely happens in sports because so many people are watching. People always think it's easier than it really is. But you hear it in anything, right? It's like people want to second guess how you drive a car, or if you can build a house, like how easy it is to build a house. And whatever it is that you're doing, people tend to second guess you. And like you said, there's so much stuff on Twitter now or anywhere on Instagram or whatever it is. I actually read an article yesterday about guys being harassed and kind of being stalked a little bit now that there's so much gambling that's legal in the United States on sports, that these guys are being harassed, for not winning baseball games. But, it's something that, you try. For me, I always try to keep my life simple when I was playing baseball. It's like, I don't want to own a restaurant. For me, I didn't have kids. It was like, what can I do on a day-to-day basis to just feel like I'm focused in the game? And I was going to wake up and I was going to think about saving my energy to go to the park to get that squat workout in, because I'm going to get a massage. I'm going to get acupuncture. I'm going to throw my bullpen. I'm going to watch the baseball game. And I'm going to do that every day. And kind of keeping outside distractions, even reading the newspaper and watching the news. A lot of that stuff I didn't do when I played, and that allowed me to kind of be free and easy. And, like a simple thing, I was driving my car today, and I was thinking this because somebody was honking their horn at me. If you're driving your car and somebody's next to you and you think maybe the guy's frustrated with you a little bit, but you're not sure, if you don't look at the guy and you just drive and you get off your exit, and maybe it doesn't irritate you. But if you look over him just before you get off the exit and he flips you a bird, that might irritate you for the next hour, even though you don't know the person at all and nothing else has changed, right? And that's kind of the way I think about reading the newspaper, listening to the radio host, and letting people beat you up from the outside world. There's no reason to do it when you're the guy in the arena playing the game.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you're the one doing it, not those people that are talking about it, and you're the one that's so successful doing it. So it definitely can be tough these days, I think, having that kind of success. And that's what makes it even more special, watching these guys out there who are just grinding and doing it every day. But this was such an absolute pleasure having you on here with me. I really appreciate all of your insight that you gave. And, like I mentioned at the beginning, I would like the Red Sox to maybe start playing some better games, but we'll see what happens there.
We were there for the 20th anniversary, and everybody was saying, it's going to be a miserable year. They're going to end up in last place. They didn't put any money into the team this year. But, they're middle of the pack or whatever. If you look at their record versus some other records in some other divisions, including the Cincinnati Reds, it's not as bad as some people thought. So, it's a long season. And sometimes if there's one or two guys on a team that can find their kind of like their level ground, right? Like it's like, when you're a professional and you've gotten to a place where I can put up 275 every year. Like that's just what I do. I'm Brandon Phillips and I hit 275. When you know that and you can do it year after year, sometimes there's a year when you catch one or two guys who kind of blossom into that player right in front of your eyes. And when that happens, sometimes a team can turn. And so you just never really know.
You never really know is right. Just like Bronson Arroyo said, that is baseball. And the Red Sox do still have a chance at a wild card spot. And coming up, I'm going to be going over some key pieces for the Red Sox to make a run. But first, I absolutely need to tell you a little bit more about Game Time. Game Time is a great ticketing vendor to ensure that you're getting the lowest price tickets for any event you might want to go to, whether that's a sporting event, a concert, or any type of event that involves purchasing tickets. The nice thing about it is you can make sure that you're getting good seats before you buy, because you'll see the view from the seat to make sure it's not obstructed or anything like that. So you can ensure that your money is being well spent, because there are ticketing vendors where you can't do that. And it can be frustrating if you have something that's blocking your view of the product and what you're trying to see. And especially now with it being in the middle of the NBA finals, it's a good chance for you to try to get some tickets to a game if the Celtics are still playing past tonight. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. All you have to do is just download the app for last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I've had really good luck with Game Time, so I don't suspect it to be any different for you. So head to that today for all of your ticketing needs. Also, just a reminder to check out Locked On Sports today, as we have launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. And you can stay caught up in all things going on in sports with all of our local experts on Locked On. So we absolutely have you covered if you just subscribe to Locked On Sports today with the biggest stories in all of sports. So Bronson Arroyo mentioned at the end of his interview with me that you never really know. It's baseball. Any team could come out and compete and be the team that goes all the way. I mean, last year, I don't think there would have been anybody that suspected the Diamondbacks to go to the World Series. I know I certainly did not have that on my bingo card, and that just goes to show you that anything can happen. You just need to have the momentum. And the Red Sox are a team that are very much lingering in that wild card race right now. For a lot of the season, they've lingered between 2 or 3 games back of that final wild card spot. And that's something they still have a chance to achieve. They're not going to win the division at this point. There's just too much discrepancy between them and the Orioles and the Yankees. Those teams are better teams than the Red Sox right now, but you don't need to win the division to go far in the postseason. And we've seen this happen with teams before. Now, the biggest key for the Red Sox, if they do want to make the playoffs, is to be healthy. I mean, they've just had so many injuries that they've been dealing with. And if they can get healthy, that could be an absolute game changer for this Red Sox team heading into the playoffs. But a couple surprise players that are emerging now that we need to look out for include David Hamilton, who started off incredibly slow, and he's bounced around between AAA and the majors the last couple of years. And it was really hard to read where he was at in terms of his ability level, but he has the potential to be a very good player with a lot of upside, and that starts with his speed. If he gets on base, his ability to get around those base paths and score is pretty scary for other teams. And if you use the combination of speed between him and Duran to your advantage, then the Red Sox can score runs, because the worst nightmare for opposing pitchers is putting a guy like David Hamilton or Jarren Duran on base, because the chances of them first stealing a base and then eventually coming around to score is very high. So those two things alone will be able to give David Hamilton a little bit more of an opportunity, is having that speed and being able to throw off opposing pitchers when they know he's on base and is more likely to come around the base path. So it might rattle them a little bit. Also, he's really been hot at the plate lately. At the beginning of the season, he definitely was not having that same kind of success. And I truly feel like experience is so key here. And he's been able to showcase what he can do with the bat, and I think he's becoming more and more comfortable to playing up at the major league level, and it's allowed him to succeed more when it comes to his offense. So I really like that about him. If he can continue to hit the way that he is, I don't really see a reason why the Red Sox shouldn't keep him on the roster, at least for now. I feel like he's earning more and more time in that starting lineup for Boston. So that's one thing that surprised me and could be a key piece down the road when it comes to the Red Sox making the playoffs if he continues to hit the way that he is. And also Tanner Houck, just his absolute dominance on the mound and knowing we can feel good every time he's out there. He's no doubt the ace of the staff, and he has been consistent and has been able to pitch effectively in nearly every start, and he has been giving length. That was a big thing that was a concern heading into the season, was is he going to be able to provide us with enough innings in order to not fatigue the bullpen? And he has been doing just that. He's been giving us pretty much everything you can ask for in a starting pitcher, and he rightfully should be in the Cy Young conversation with how good of a season he's having. He has a complete game shutout on his resume from this season. So I've been very impressed with him, and you need a number one starter on your pitching staff if you want a chance to make the playoffs and make a little bit of a run. So if Tanner continues to pitch the way that he's been pitching, that puts the Red Sox in a very good spot to be able to succeed down the road. Now, I know that it can be tough relying on one pitcher, which is why you do need more depth in your starting rotation. So I'm really hoping Brian Bayo can turn things around and become more consistent. But Cutter Crawford definitely deserves props for how well he's been pitching and his ability to get guys out and limit the damage when he has runners on base. So he's another person that we can rely on in a stretch run. And if you have two solid starting pitchers, then you're well set up for a playoff series, because then you have those two players who can pitch in 4 out of the 7 games if you were to have a series that goes 7 games, and then you throw in your number 3 in there accordingly. So you'd be in a good spot if you have two solid starters, and then you obviously need to have other starters who can keep up and not be very bad and can be consistent. And I feel like that's what we're getting from a good portion of this rotation right now, especially Cooper Criswell, who has been a concern early on because of the fact that he was new and we didn't really know what to expect from him. But he has far surpassed any expectations that were put on him early on, and he's been delivering and pitching at the level that we need him to pitch at. So he definitely deserves props for stepping seamlessly into Garrett Whitlock's role when he got injured and us not knowing what this pitcher was going to be able to do. And for him to come in here and just embrace the moment and pitch well, I give him a ton of credit for that. So that's another big thing. And also, if Connor Wong can continue to hit the way that he's been hitting and stay consistent, that's another big game changer for the Red Sox, because we've always liked the defense of Connor Wong. He's always had a good arm, and he's been able to stop balls that are coming to him at the plate, but his offensive productivity wasn't quite there. And now this year, he's just having a fantastic season offensively. So if he can continue to do that, then the Red Sox are a team that could be in the mix. So I wanted to just remind you that it's anybody's game, really. And you don't really know what's going to happen until it plays out. And like you heard from Bronson Arroyo, like you would have maybe heard from Lenny DiNardo when he was on my show a few weeks ago, teams need to just stay focused. And once you get into the playoffs, if things click for you, why can't you be the team that wins it all? And I'm not saying the Red Sox will win it all this year, but I'm saying don't close the door on this team yet, because they still have players who need to get healthy for the stretch run at the end of the season. And they've been staying afloat in terms of their ability to linger around 500 and be in a close proximity to teams that are near them in the wild card race. So lots of things that we can be hopeful about here. You take somebody like Wilyer Abreu, who unfortunately is on the IL, but has been hitting very well this year for the Boston Red Sox. Cedar Rafaela, who plays tremendous defense. So lots of players that emerge that have a potential of being key pieces for a Red Sox potential run down the road. But everything needs to come together, and that's going to be the biggest thing for the Red Sox is consistency and whether they can come together as a team to nail every aspect of their game. And that's difficult for sure, and especially if you don't have all of your main players together because guys are on the IL, it could create less of a sense of cohesiveness. So hopefully they can figure that out, and watch out for the Red Sox down the stretch when players start getting healthy. So we'll see what happens, but that third wild card spot should be the aim because the division is pretty out of reach at this point for the Red Sox. It just likely is not going to happen. But again, that's okay. We've seen the Red Sox win the World Series when coming out of a wild card spot. So as always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.